In this video, I will go through some more of the cool VEX functions you can do that's pretty common and very useful. So first of all, let's start with printf. So if you go inside the help, you can see it basically says that it's going to print whatever we want from our any value that we write inside here, or it's an attribute. So there's lots of kind of a formatting for it, but for us, basically all we have to do is before we want to say what we want to print off, all we have to specify the format of it. So the format is going to be in quotes, and all we need to do is in here there's a couple of help for us. So all I'm going to do is just percentage sign and let's say d, percentage d. It's basically print an integer variable in decimal. So for it just to work, just write this, and after the quotes we can press comma and then what we want to print off. Let's say I want to add p dot x value of our attribute, and then close it down, and that's it. And if you like to look at our console, let's clear it off and go again. You can see it basically copied every point value that is every p dot x value that is in our attribute list, like that. And if you want it to be every attribute in its own line, what we will do is just put down a / and n, like that. Let's clear it. I comma without this one, like that. So now we have every attribute in its own line. So that's all I want to do in this, because there's actually a pretty cool one, better one. It's a little bit more interesting. Instead of printf, if you write s in front of it, we get another VEX function. It's called sprintf. Take a look at what it says. It's basically the same as printf, but instead of it's going to copy it to the console, it's going to actually create a string, and we can create an attribute from it. So right now it's not going to do anything because we actually not outputting anything in here in it. So for us to do it, we just have to create a string attribute. So s at my string equals this, and now you can see what we are getting, and also this n we have to delete because I don't think it actually understands what it is in this printf. So we just $sign and d. You can see it basically create a string attribute. It's basically the same as we have converted from the float to the string attribute all of these values, like that. So why am I installing this? First of all, I think it's very cool, and what you can do is actually kind of create the randomization and randomize it based on a string, not just a number. So what I'm going to do is create a box. Let's create some 3 objects: box, tube, and sphere. And one of the more common things to do is actually let's say I'm gonna give these all objects names that I want to, let's say, duplicate or whatever. So just put down name attribute. Name is kind of a very basically the most popular string attribute. Basically, we're going to give it a name, and it's going to be called my object left. Now let's copy it. Actually, I didn't copy it. Left. Let's call it center and right, like that. So now we have our 3 values, but let's say we want to randomize it based off of its string attribute. With this, we can very easily do it. So let's make them together like that. And if you take a look at our points, go to now it's a primitive. Name attribute is going to be primitive. What you want to do is, if you want to copy to the points, you have to make it actually the point attribute, like that. So now we have our point attribute, which is name, and it's a string. And now what we can do with this sprint function, we can actually randomize it based off its last name. So we can know that our name is all the same, my object, only thing that's different is the end of it. One is center, one is right, and other is left. One more thing I wanted to add, for the more visual way, you can actually use the name of the actual node as its driving of the name. So if you take a look at the group node, you can see it's automatically going to do this $OS. So if you actually put down, copy this $OS and put it inside the name, which is very useful, it's basically going to create the copy its name. Its name in here as a string attribute is going to be the same as its node. So it's very useful. You can see, I'll just copy, let's just enter, like that. You can see that we have as a name OS, and it's basically going to take a name of our nodes. So we have these nodes, and you can pipe inside any object that you want. So that's very useful. Just one trick that's not very, it's kind of obvious when you put down a grid, but kind of group node, but once you start to work with other ones, it's you kind of maybe forget about them. And now let's put down a copy to point node. So if you take a look at copy node, it's basically going to, what you're going to use in Houdini 18. Basically the best way now to copy is using this piece attribute. In other versions, in previous ones, you had to use the loop method, but just for copying, the best method right now is just putting inside the copy to points, and then required copy, if you want to copy, and then what we want. So grid. Now let's take a look how big our object. So grid has to be a little bit bigger. So maybe something like 30, like that, and more points. And also what's cool about this, there's actually now pack and instance option, so it's very fast when you copy. So now all we have to do is, if you think about, once we had done this before with integer, it was a little bit easier because it's basically just a number. We assign our numbers. Basically this was 1, 2, and 3, and then it just, whenever the attributes matched, they basically were copied to that point. Right now it's a little bit different. We are still using the same name, so let's just create a name attribute. So we could do it with attribute create node, but since we're learning VEX, let's just create it inside attribute random node. What you can do is just set, so that's string at name, and then just close it down. So basically we created a string attribute name, and it has no value right now. You see it's empty. So we have just declared it, but we have not given any value for it. For the most basic demonstration, let's just create a name attribute. Let's call it the my object, let's say right. So let's just set name equals, and remember it's string, it has about in quotes like that. Now we have name that matches one of our attribute numbers in here, attribute name. So now let's just copy to the point we require, and now in a piece attribute, external pack instance, say name, like that. And now you can see we are copying spheres because it is the only one that actually matches the right. And if you let's say copy inside here the center, you can see we are now copying all the tubes because that's the one that actually matches. So all we have to do is randomize our right, center, and left. I just cleared out our attributes node, and let's start it from the start. So now we want to do is create random points values for our every point that we're gonna copy to our geometry. So let's create a float attribute. Before that, let's create it as attribute. After that, let's just convert it to this basic variable. So let's call it my values equals, and I'm sure you know how this goes now, rand chf. Now let's create a channel called my values. Now let's multiply by add pt num, and let's close it down like that. Now what we got, you see it's actually not like that, and now you see, there we go. Now it has gone. Now we got random points for every one of these. But of course, since we have more than two objects in this randomization, we actually want to convert this to the different range. And if you remember my previous videos, you can do it using a fit function. So for that, we just have to move these values. So before rand, you can just put down a fit. Remember, close it inside the brackets. It's the whole thing, and after before the last brackets, let's put down our new range. Our range is gonna be so min is going to be 0 and max is going to be 2, like that. Actually, I forgot to comma in here, and actually 0, 1, like that. You can see now we have our values from 0 to 1, but one last thing is that we actually are not getting integer values. For us this to work, we have to create integer values from these. With that, we can actually use another function around this fit function. It's called rint function. If you take a look at, start writing, and if you take a look at this in a help, rint is going to be basically round the numbers to closest to the whole number. So we are basically going to wrap this whole thing inside the rint function. So what we got these float numbers, now we got actual the integer values from 0 to 2. So that's exactly what we need. We have three objects that we want to copy to, and they are all randomized, and we can change even the seed for it, like that. One thing I want to know, we actually didn't have to use the rint function, but for the demonstration, I think it's pretty cool to know that you can actually round out these numbers. So now what we do is create our string value that's going to change. So we know that we want to left, center, and right differently. So let's create a string value. For now, let's create it just an attribute. Let's create it as a my string and equals. Remember, it has to be in quotes. Let's say, actually, we don't want to give any, just my string, like that. So now I have empty string value, my string. So this is where we're gonna copy our three words: center, right, and left. My string attribute that we created basically ensure that we can actually change the my object thing in front of it. So only thing that we have to worry about that all of these has a center, left, and right. So we could write at the now. So I just start writing it. I'm gonna explain it. So now we're gonna use the if function. So remember in my couple last videos, we used a little bit of if function, and it's pretty easy to understand. So basically, if something is right in our what we write in if inside if, then this happens. So what we want to do is, if our my value is, let's say, if in a bracket, if, so let's copy if at my values equals, let's say we know that we have from 0 to 2 equals 0, and one thing to know is that we have to write in two equal signs. Since although they are rounded out, this with rint function, they are still a float number. So just two equal signs, and then outside the brackets we have to what happens. So if that we want to set our my string, let's just copy at my string outside the brackets equals, and in the quotes we know that we have, let's say, right, is right, and then just close it down like that. And basically that's it. And you can see whenever we have 0 inside our attributes, it's basically going to copy in right inside it, like that. All you have to do is now copy this one, and whenever you want to add a value, all you have to do is, instead of if, you have to write else if. So now if else if equals 1, we want to be at, let's say, center, and now let's copy it again, and now you can just use the else if all the way, how many you want. And now we know that you have a left, and let's give it a 2 value like that. Now you can see in my string we have basically copied all of these. Whenever there's a 1, 2 or 3, it's appropriate last for center, right or left. Now all we have to do is use our sprint function that we just learned. So now we can actually add s at name equals, actually we don't have to even say s at name because it's one of the universal attributes that are recognized by VEX. Inside here, just like at the video beginning, we have to do is let's reference sprint in a bracket. We have to do is basically say, first of all we have to notify our formatting, so we know that my object is the uniforming where everything is. So you know that my object is the one thing that is on all of threes. So you have to do is in brackets say in quotes my object and underscore, and then what we have to do is put down a percentage height and the like that. So after the with the percentage sign, it already knows that we do not have to copy this as a string. It's just a formatting, how we want to format it. And after the quotes, put down a comma, and then we know that all our values are inside my values, so inside my string. So add my string like that. Then just close it down like that. So now what we have now, you can see with our name attribute, we have basically copied this my string with this center to the my object center like that. You can see we have all of these in here. And now what we can do is actually reference them. As long as you have this piece attribute and it matches so name, you can see we have now basically copying these. And of course we can actually even randomize it with my value randomization. Last couple of things for this video I wanted to add is that we can actually create this attribute which we are randomizing these values outside this wrangle node. That would be actually even better for us. So what I'm going to do is create the attribute. You could do wrangle or even with the attribute create. So we can do with attribute create node. So we know that our integer values are my values. So in here, I just copy it and create the same attribute inside this one. So make it an integer because we have integers in here, just the full numbers. That's fine. And make it value whatever you want. Let's just make it 1 because now it doesn't really matter. Now that we have this value, what we can do is put down attribute randomize in here, and now just copy the same attribute that we want to randomize, and in here basically its dimension is going to be 1. Minimal value will be, since we have in here we are from 1 to 2, from 0 to 2, just minimal is going to be 0 and 1, and 2 is going to max. And in the last video I showed how can we create a uneven distribution of the points, and all you have to do is go to distribution and custom discrete. And now actually we didn't even have to add those values there. So now since we have 3 values added to these 3 in here, 0, 1 and 2, like that. And now all we have to do is actually delete the attributes that we created in here. So we have these my attributes, my values. In here we just have to delete the reference that we created our own values for it. So basically it's attribute, and of course there's going to be them in here, and we don't have to create in this inside this node anymore because we have already this kind of attributes. And one last thing, that we actually do not have to make an attribute my values. So my values is the string that we created, that is not my values but my strings. So that is the string that we actually do not need to see. So what we have to do is just delete this at references to all of my strings. So add my strings and this one like that. And we have to specify that it's a string variable, not an attribute, like that. And that's it. Yeah, basically doing the same thing, only now we do not have like cluttered up inside our attributes. And now you can see it's basically doing the same thing, but because we create this attribute randomizing here, we can actually control how many points we want of these objects. So now we can actually control the amount and what's the weight for these kind of objects. We want more spheres or more cubes or tubes, like that. So that's, I think, pretty cool that we can do that. That's it for this tutorial. Hope you found something useful in it, and see you next time.